He didn't send her a wedding invitation to catch up, he sent it to publicly ruin her in front of his new elite circle. But what he didn't realize was that she wasn't coming alone. She walked into the venue on the arm of a $100 billionaire, holding the hands of 3 little boys who shared her ex's exact face. Before the story continues, tell us where you are watching from in the comments section, and please subscribe and like this video to help us grow. For one long heartbeat, the ballroom forgot how to breathe. Crystal chandeliers glowed above polished marble floors. A string quartet played softly near the grand staircase, but even the musicians faltered as conversations dissolved into whispers. Every head turned toward the entrance. A little boy on the left adjusted the tiny navy blue bow tie around his neck. The boy on the right squeezed his mother's hand. The youngest, walking confidently beside the tall man in the charcoal tuxedo, looked around the room with innocent curiosity. Then someone whispered the words nobody else wanted to say aloud. They look exactly like Ethan. The whisper spread across the ballroom like fire finding dry grass. No. It can't be. Look at their eyes. It's his face. The groom standing near the floral-covered stage slowly turned toward the entrance. The smile he had carefully rehearsed for months disappeared. His champagne glass slipped from his fingers. It shattered against the marble floor. Silence followed. Across the room, Amelia Bennett met his eyes for the first time in nearly 5 years. She didn't smile. She didn't glare. She simply nodded once, the kind of polite greeting reserved for strangers who happened to share an elevator. That hurt Ethan more than anger ever could. Beside her, her husband rested a reassuring hand against the small of her back. Calm, steady, protective. Without saying a word, he reminded her she wasn't walking into this room alone. She never would again. 3 weeks earlier, the envelope had arrived without warning. Cream-colored. Heavy. Expensive enough to announce its purpose before it was even opened. Amelia had almost mistaken it for another charity invitation until she noticed the elegant handwriting. Mrs. Amelia Ashford. Not Bennett. Not her maiden name. Ashford. Someone had taken the time to learn her married name. She frowned. Who still sends paper invitations? She murmured. Her husband looked up from the breakfast table, lowering the newspaper. What is it? I don't know. She carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a wedding invitation. Ethan Carter. And Vanessa Collins. The names alone didn't surprise her. She had known through mutual acquaintances that Ethan was seeing someone. People moved on. Life moved forward. That wasn't what made her hands grow cold. A smaller card slipped from the envelope. Handwritten. Amelia. I hope you've truly forgiven the past. It would mean a great deal if you attended the happiest day of my life. Some old friends have been asking what became of you. I'd love for them to finally meet you. Front row seat reserved. Warm regards. Ethan. She read it twice. Then a third time. Her husband quietly reached for the card. He didn't interrupt. He simply read. His expression barely changed. Only the slightest tightening around his jaw betrayed his thoughts. Finally he asked, how many people from your old life are going to be there? Almost everyone. Business partners? She nodded. My former colleagues, our university friends, his investors, his family. He looked back at the invitation. He chose the front row. Amelia gave a humorless laugh. He always did enjoy an audience. She remembered exactly what Ethan loved most. Control. Not money. Not success. Control. When they first met 12 years earlier, he had been ambitious without being arrogant. He made her laugh. He remembered birthdays. He carried groceries for elderly neighbors without expecting praise. She fell in love with that version of him. The version before success became his identity. As his career grew, so did his obsession with appearances. Every dinner became networking. Every vacation became content for investors. Every friendship became a transaction. If someone couldn't help him climb higher, they slowly disappeared. She had watched the change happen one compromise at a time, until eventually she no longer recognized the man she planned to marry. Back in the present, Amelia folded the invitation. I'm not going. Her husband didn't answer immediately. Instead he poured another cup of coffee. The morning sunlight reflected across the kitchen island. Outside, laughter echoed through the garden. The triplets were chasing their golden retriever across the lawn. One had already fallen into the flower bed. Another was trying very seriously to rescue a butterfly with a toy bucket. The third declared himself captain of an imaginary spaceship. Their father smiled. They've invented another universe. Amelia couldn't help smiling. They always do. He watched her for a moment, then asked gently, Are you declining because you've healed? Or because you're still letting him decide where you belong? She looked away. That question landed deeper than she expected. He never pushed. He simply waited. Years of marriage had taught him that silence often gave better answers than advice. I don't want to give him what he wants, she finally said. And what does he want? To remind everyone that he won. Her husband leaned back. I don't think people who have truly won spend money inviting ghosts. She looked at him. He smiled softly. I think he's trying to convince himself. His name was Alexander Ashford. Most people who met him had no idea he controlled one of the largest privately owned technology and infrastructure groups in the world. He preferred introducing himself simply as Alex. His suits were elegant but understated. His watches rarely displayed recognizable luxury brands. He drove himself whenever possible. The first time Amelia discovered his actual net worth, she thought an extra zero had accidentally been added. Several extra zeros. When she confronted him, he'd laughed. I was hoping you'd never search my name. You own half the companies I use every day. I don't. She raised an eyebrow. I own parts of people who own parts of companies. She had thrown a pillow at him. He caught it effortlessly. That had become one of her favorite memories. The triplets ran inside. Dad. Alex crouched instinctively. 3 little bodies crashed into him simultaneously. We built a volcano. It exploded. No, Liam made it explode. It was supposed to explode. Alex laughed. I suspected as much. One by one he hugged them. Each boy looked remarkably similar. Dark hair. Bright eyes. The same smile. Except, every now and then, Amelia caught herself noticing something else. The shape of a chin. The curve of a smile. A certain expression. Features that reminded her of someone she'd spent years trying to forget. The thought always unsettled her. Alex noticed the flicker in her expression. He always noticed. You okay? She nodded quickly. Just thinking. You've been doing a lot of that. Later that evening, Alex found her standing alone on the balcony overlooking the city skyline. She hadn't touched the invitation again. He stepped beside her. I'll support whatever you decide. I know. If staying home protects your peace, we stay home. If going helps you close the final chapter, we go. She turned toward him. Aren't you even curious? About Ethan? She nodded. Alex smiled faintly. I stopped competing with ghosts a long time ago. She slipped her hand into his. You always know the right thing to say. No. I just know you're worth more than proving yourself to someone who failed to see it. She rested her head against his shoulder. For several quiet moments neither of them spoke. The city lights stretched endlessly beneath them. Then one small voice interrupted. Dad. The youngest triplet stood in the doorway holding 3 toy airplanes. We can't agree who's the pilot. Alex sighed dramatically. A national emergency. The boys nodded with complete seriousness. Amelia laughed. Real laughter. The kind Ethan had not heard in years. Across the city, Ethan Carter stood inside the ballroom during a rehearsal dinner. His best man adjusted a tie while checking seating arrangements. You really invited Amelia? Ethan didn't look up. Of course. Vanessa knows? She approved. The best man frowned. Why? Ethan walked toward the seating chart. His finger rested on one particular table. Front row. Perfect view of the vows. People remember endings. And? I want everyone to remember mine. His friend studied him carefully. Or are you hoping she'll remember what she lost? Ethan's jaw tightened. I've moved on. His friend didn't answer. Instead, he glanced at the empty front row seat with Amelia's name. Something about it felt less like closure, and more like unfinished business. 2 days before the wedding, Amelia finally picked up the invitation again. She stared at it for a long time. Alex entered quietly. Without looking up, she asked, What if he's right? About what? What if everyone there still sees me as the woman who got left behind? Alex walked over, took the invitation from her hands and folded it shut. They'll see whatever they're determined to see. He looked into her eyes. But the only people whose opinion should matter. He glanced toward the hallway where 3 little boys were laughing over a game. Are already waiting for you at home. Amelia followed his gaze. A slow, peaceful smile touched her lips. Then she took a deep breath. I think. She paused. I think it's time we accepted the invitation. Alex nodded once. No celebration. No dramatic speech. Just quiet confidence. I'll have our suits pressed. She laughed. That's your response? I already knew your answer. You did. You stopped being afraid the moment you smiled. On the morning of the wedding, a sleek black sedan rolled toward the venue. Inside, the three boys adjusted their tiny jackets while arguing about who would hold their mother's hand. Alex watched them with amused patience. Amelia looked out the window as the Grand Hotel came into view. Her heartbeat quickened. Not from fear. From anticipation. She had spent years wondering whether this chapter of her life would ever truly end. She had no idea that before the ceremony even began, one glance at three innocent little faces would unravel a secret no one in that ballroom had ever imagined. The black sedan came to a smooth stop beneath the hotel's sweeping glass entrance. A valet hurried forward, then hesitated. The license plate was familiar. Not because it belonged to a celebrity. Because it belonged to Ashford Global Holdings. His expression changed instantly. "Good afternoon, Mr. Ashford." Alex smiled politely. "Thank you." Nothing more. No announcement. No expectation that anyone should know who he was. He stepped around the car and opened Amelia's door before anyone else could. She took his hand. Not because she needed help. Because she wanted to. Then came the boys. Liam. Noah. Oliver. Each climbed out with the seriousness only 7-year-olds could manage when wearing tiny tuxedos. "Remember?" Amelia whispered. "We're guests." Liam nodded. "And no racing." Noah sighed dramatically. "Even if the hallway is really long?" Alex smiled. "Especially then." Oliver pointed toward the fountain. "It looks like a castle." "It does," Alex agreed. "Maybe after the wedding we'll find out if there's a dragon." The boys laughed. The sound floated through the entrance. Several guests turned. Then came the second look. Their smiles faded. Eyes widened. One woman slowly lowered her champagne glass. Another whispered to the man beside her. "Do you see it? The children. They look just like Ethan." Alex noticed the whispers immediately. He didn't react. Instead, he gently brushed an invisible speck of dust from Oliver's shoulder. His focus never left his family. That quiet confidence somehow made the whispers even louder. Inside the bridal suite, Vanessa admired herself in the mirror. Her wedding planner adjusted the train of her gown. "Everything is perfect." Vanessa smiled. "It should be." One bridesmaid entered, looking unusually pale. "Vanessa? What is it?" "I think she's here." Vanessa's smile barely moved. "So? But she isn't alone. I know she's married." "It's not that." The bridesmaid swallowed. "There are children." Vanessa frowned. "What children?" "3 little boys." "And?" The bridesmaid hesitated. "They all look exactly like Ethan." Silence. Vanessa slowly turned around. "What?" "I thought you should know." Vanessa stared at her reflection. For the first time all morning, she didn't like what she saw. Meanwhile, the ballroom buzzed with nervous excitement. Guests tried pretending nothing unusual had happened. They failed miserably. Old university friends discreetly compared photographs on their phones. Former co-workers stared openly. An elderly aunt whispered, "It's the eyes." "No. It's the smile. It can't be coincidence." Someone quietly asked, "Did Ethan have another family?" No one would hide triplets. Would they? No answer came. Because nobody knew. Not even Amelia. Alex helped pull out Amelia's chair at their reserved front row table. She looked down at the name card. Ethan had personally requested this seat. Exactly as promised. Perfect view of the altar. Perfect view for public humiliation. She almost laughed. Instead, she calmly sat down. The humiliation never arrived. Instead, every guest seemed far more interested in staring at her family than judging her. Across the aisle, Ethan finally appeared. Confident. Perfectly tailored tuxedo. Relaxed smile. Until his eyes landed on Amelia. Then Alex. Then the boys. Everything stopped. His footsteps slowed. The color drained from his face. The wedding coordinator whispered, "Sir?" He didn't answer. His eyes remained fixed on Liam. Then Noah. Then Oliver. It wasn't simply resemblance. It was unsettling. Like looking at childhood photographs brought to life. His own brother quietly stepped beside him. "Ethan." No response. "Ethan." Finally he blinked. "What?" His voice cracked. "What is this?" "I don't know." Ethan looked again. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Yet, the boys smiled exactly the way he smiled as a child. The ceremony should have started. Instead, guests kept looking backward. The officiant checked his watch. The musicians restarted the same melody twice. Nobody paid attention. One little voice broke the silence. Oliver leaned toward Amelia. Mom? Yes. Why is everybody looking at us? She smiled gently. They're curious. Did we do something wrong? Alex answered before she could. No. They're just surprised. Oliver accepted that answer immediately. Children often did. Adults rarely could. Across the room, Vanessa finally entered. Elegant. Poised. Beautiful. Every camera turned toward her. For exactly 5 seconds. Then attention drifted back to the front row. She noticed immediately. Her smile stiffened. She followed everyone's gaze. Straight to Amelia. Then, the children. Vanessa slowed. Even from across the ballroom, the resemblance was impossible to ignore. She looked toward Ethan. He wasn't watching her. He was staring at the boys. His expression wasn't guilt. It wasn't recognition. It was confusion. Pure, complete confusion. Vanessa's stomach tightened. The officiant cleared his throat. We are gathered here today. No one listened. Not even the bride. Not even the groom. Liam quietly leaned toward Alex. Dad. Yes. Can I ask something? Always. Why does that man keep looking at us? Alex glanced toward Ethan. Then back at Liam. Sometimes people think they recognize someone. But he doesn't know us. No. He doesn't. The answer seemed simple. Yet something about Alex's calm voice made Amelia glance toward him. He met her eyes. His expression remained steady. But behind that calm, she sensed he was thinking. Deeply. As vows began, Amelia drifted into memories she hadn't visited in years. She remembered another ballroom. Another engagement party. Another evening filled with expensive suits and polished smiles. She had stood beside Ethan then. Young. Hopeful. Certain they would grow old together. His hand had remained around her waist all night. Whenever someone congratulated them, he smiled proudly. This is Amelia. My future wife. Back then. He said those words as though they meant everything. Back then. She believed him. Months later, things began changing. Not suddenly. Quietly. Almost invisibly. Ethan's company secured a major investment. Long hours became longer. Dinner conversations became business meetings. His phone never left his hand. One evening, Amelia waited nearly 3 hours inside their favorite restaurant. The waiter approached gently. Would you like to order? I'll wait. Another hour passed. Finally Ethan arrived. No apology. No flowers. Only exhaustion. Investor meeting. I understand. You always say that. She smiled softly. Because I do. He looked at her strangely. I need someone more ambitious. She laughed, assuming he was joking. He wasn't. Over the following year, the gap between them widened. Amelia worked as a pediatric occupational therapist. She loved helping children recover after injuries. She often came home emotionally exhausted, yet fulfilled. Ethan couldn't understand. You're wasting your talent. I'm helping children. You could earn 5 times more. I don't need 5 times more. He stared at her. You don't think big enough. She answered quietly. I think differently. Neither realized. That single conversation marked the beginning of the end. Back in the ballroom, the officiant asked, who gives this bride? No one heard the rest. An elderly guest leaned toward another. I knew Ethan years ago. So? He looked exactly like those boys when he was little. His friend nodded slowly. I've been thinking the same thing. Across the room, Ethan's mother sat unusually still. Her hands trembled slightly. Her husband noticed. Margaret. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Something buried deep inside her memory had begun stirring. A face. A hospital room. A promise. She couldn't quite reach it. Yet. The ceremony paused unexpectedly when one of the flower girls tripped. Without hesitation, Oliver stood. Walked over. Helped the little girl collect the scattered petals. It's okay, he whispered. I fall down too. She smiled through embarrassed tears. Thank you. He returned to his seat. The room watched. Not because of what he did. Because of how naturally he did it. Alex gently squeezed Oliver's shoulder. I'm proud of you. Oliver beamed. Amelia looked at her husband. You've taught them kindness. Alex smiled. They teach me every day. Several nearby guests overheard. One elderly businessman quietly whispered, that's real wealth. Halfway through the ceremony, Vanessa could no longer ignore what was happening. Nobody was watching the bride. They were watching Amelia's family. Not with envy, with fascination. During a short musical performance, Vanessa leaned toward Ethan. "Who are they?" He answered without taking his eyes off the boys. "I don't know. Don't lie. I'm not." "Then why won't you stop staring?" He finally looked at her. "Because I honestly don't understand what I'm seeing." She searched his face. For the first time, she believed him. He truly didn't know, which somehow made everything even stranger. As applause echoed through the ballroom, one elderly woman approached Amelia's table. She smiled warmly. "You probably don't remember me." Amelia stood politely. "Mrs. Donnelly? You remembered. You taught literature." Mrs. Donnelly laughed. "I did." She looked toward the boys. "They're beautiful. Thank you. They remind me of someone." Amelia smiled politely. "So everyone keeps saying." Mrs. Donnelly studied Amelia carefully. "Life has been kind to you." Amelia glanced toward Alex. Then toward the boys laughing quietly together. "Yes. It really has." Mrs. Donnelly followed her gaze. Then leaned closer. "You know, I always hoped you'd find someone who looked at you the way that gentleman does." Amelia blinked. "What do you mean?" Mrs. Donnelly smiled gently. "He watches you when you're not looking." Amelia turned. Alex was listening to Noah explain with absolute seriousness why dragons would make excellent accountants. He laughed. Really laughed. Then almost instinctively, his eyes found Amelia. Just for a second. Not to check where she was. Not to make sure she was behaving. Simply because seeing her smile still made him smile. Mrs. Donnelly whispered, "That's love." Across the ballroom, Ethan saw that same glance. The effortless warmth. The quiet partnership. The kind of love that never needed to prove itself. A strange ache settled in his chest. Not jealousy of Alex's wealth. Not even of Amelia's happiness. Something deeper. A painful realization that somewhere along the way, he had once been loved like that. And he had traded it away chasing applause from people who barely remembered his name once the next successful entrepreneur appeared. Before he could gather his thoughts, his mother suddenly stood from her seat. Her eyes were fixed on the triplets. Her breathing had become shallow. One forgotten memory had finally broken through. She whispered only 4 words. "I remember that hospital." Then she looked directly at Amelia, her face filled with disbelief. "Does she know?" Margaret Carter's voice barely carried beyond the front row. "I remember that hospital." Her eyes never left the 3 boys. "Does she know?" Amelia stood slowly. "Know what?" Margaret's lips trembled. She looked at Ethan. Then at her husband. Neither man spoke. Alex quietly placed a reassuring hand on Amelia's shoulder. "What is she talking about?" Margaret closed her eyes for a moment, as though reopening a door she had kept locked for decades. There was another son. The room fell silent. Ethan frowned. "What?" Margaret looked at him with tears gathering in her eyes. "You had an identical twin." Ethan laughed once. A confused, disbelieving laugh. "No. You didn't. You couldn't. My brother would have told me." Margaret shook her head. "There was no brother to tell you." 29 years earlier, a violent winter storm had delayed ambulances across the city. Margaret had gone into labor weeks too early. 2 boys were born. Healthy. Perfect. Identical. Ethan. And Elias. For 3 wonderful days they slept side by side. Tiny hands. Matching faces. Matching cries. Then infection swept through the neonatal ward. Doctors fought through the night. Only one baby survived. Or so everyone believed. Margaret remembered the grief. The funeral. The tiny white coffin. The years of mourning. She and her husband buried the memory because they couldn't bear to reopen the wound. Ethan grew up never knowing he had once shared the world with another heartbeat. Alex stepped forward. There was no funeral. Every eye turned toward him. Margaret stared. "What did you say?" "The child who was believed to have died." "Didn't?" A ripple spread through the ballroom. Ethan looked at Alex. "What are you talking about?" Alex remained calm. The hospital discovered the mistake less than 24 hours later. What mistake? A mix-up during the emergency evacuation. The room became perfectly still. The surviving infant had been transferred to another regional hospital under temporary records. Margaret's knees weakened. Her husband caught her arm. Alex continued gently. "By the time the error was discovered, your family had already left believing both babies had died except one." Margaret covered her mouth. No. The investigation remained buried because the hospital feared legal consequences. And because. Alex paused. The infant had already been placed under emergency protective guardianship after another family claimed him through falsified documentation. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Ethan's voice shook. So. I had a brother. Alex nodded. His name became Elias. He spent years moving through foster care before eventually being adopted by a wonderful family. Margaret whispered, "My baby." Alex looked toward the boys. Elias grew into an extraordinary man. He became a firefighter. He spent his life saving strangers. The room listened without moving. He never knew he had an identical twin. He only knew he had been adopted. Amelia slowly turned toward Alex. "You knew?" He nodded once. "Not at first." "When?" 7 years ago." She stared at him. "You never told me." "I couldn't. It wasn't my story to tell." Another flashback unfolded. 7 years earlier, Alex had quietly funded a children's rehabilitation center. One afternoon he met a firefighter visiting injured children after rescuing them from an apartment fire. That firefighter was Elias. The two men became friends. Not because of wealth. Not because of business. Because both believed character mattered more than reputation. Months later, Elias introduced Alex to his wife. And 3 energetic little boys. Triplets barely 6 months old. Life seemed full of promise. Until one rainy autumn evening. A warehouse roof collapsed during a rescue operation. Elias never came home. His wife survived him for only 18 months before an aggressive illness claimed her life. Suddenly, 3 little boys had no parents. Alex's voice softened. "I became their legal guardian." He looked at Liam. Then Noah. Finally Oliver. A year later, I adopted them. The boys smiled proudly. They had heard this story many times. To them, being chosen felt every bit as meaningful as being born into a family. Amelia's eyes filled with tears. "You never wanted attention for it." Alex smiled. "They needed a father. They didn't need headlines." She remembered that season of their marriage. Alex had disappeared often, always claiming he was helping an old friend's family. She never questioned him. Eventually, the boys simply became theirs. Not through obligation, through love. Ethan couldn't speak. His entire world had shifted. He slowly walked toward the children, then stopped several feet away. He looked at Liam. The resemblance was undeniable. Not because they were father and son. Because Liam carried Elias's face. The face Ethan would have seen every morning had fate unfolded differently. Liam offered a polite smile. "Hello." Ethan's voice cracked. "Hello." The boy tilted his head. "You look like my dad." Alex nodded gently. "He means Elias." Liam smiled. Everyone said Daddy had someone who looked just like him. Ethan covered his mouth. Tears finally came. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just quiet grief for a brother he had never met. Margaret approached cautiously. Her hands trembled. "May I?" Alex looked toward the boys. "It's your choice." Oliver stepped forward first. Then Noah. Then Liam. Margaret knelt before them. She gently touched Liam's cheek. "So much like him." She whispered through tears. "I'm sorry." The boys exchanged confused glances. Liam asked softly, "Why are you sorry?" Margaret smiled sadly. "Because I missed loving your father." Across the ballroom, guests who had expected scandal instead witnessed something entirely different. Not revenge. Not humiliation. A family finding pieces of itself. The whispers disappeared. Silence became respect. Vanessa quietly removed her veil. She looked at Ethan. "I finally understand." He turned. "I invited Amelia here because I wanted everyone to think I'd won." His voice broke. "But all I've done." He looked around the room. "Is discover everything I lost." Vanessa nodded gently. "I don't think you lost it today. I think you lost it years ago." There was no anger in her voice. Only truth. After the ceremony ended, many guests approached Alex. A prominent investor extended his hand. "Mr. Ashford." Alex smiled. "Alex is fine. I've admired your companies for years." Alex shook his hand politely. "Thank you." The investor glanced toward the boys. "What you've built at home." He smiled warmly. "Impresses me far more." Alex looked at Amelia. "I feel the same." Later that evening, the ballroom had emptied. Only a handful of people remained. Ethan found Amelia standing on the moonlit terrace overlooking the gardens. For a moment, neither spoke. Finally, "I'm sorry." Amelia looked at him. Not with bitterness. Not with triumph. Just quiet understanding. He continued, "I kept telling myself inviting you here would prove I'd moved on." She smiled faintly. "But people who move on don't keep checking who's looking back." He lowered his head. "I know. I thought success would erase regret. It doesn't. No. It only makes regret more comfortable." A small laugh escaped both of them. The first honest laugh they had shared in years. "I owe you something else," Ethan said. "What?" "The truth." She waited. "I didn't end our engagement because you weren't enough. I ended it because I became someone who believed nothing was ever enough." Amelia absorbed the words quietly. Years ago, she would have needed them. Today, they simply completed the picture. "Thank you," she said. "That matters." He looked surprised. "You forgive me?" She glanced through the ballroom windows where Alex was helping the boys finish tiny slices of wedding cake. One had frosting on his nose. Another was trying to feed cake to a decorative swan made of ice. Alex laughed helplessly. Amelia smiled. "I stopped carrying that anger a long time ago." She looked back at Ethan. "Forgiveness isn't saying what happened was acceptable. It's deciding it doesn't get to decide your future." Alex joined them a moment later. The silence was comfortable. Ethan extended his hand. "I judged you before I knew you." Alex accepted the handshake. "We've all done that to someone. You adopted my brother's sons. I adopted 3 boys who needed a family." There was no pride. No performance. Just simple truth. Ethan nodded slowly. "I hope someday." He glanced toward the boys. "They'll let me know the uncle I never knew I was." Alex smiled. "That choice belongs to them." Liam suddenly appeared between them. "Mom?" "Yes." "Can Uncle Ethan come see our treehouse sometime?" Everyone froze. Ethan blinked. "You'd call me uncle?" Liam shrugged. "Dad says families can grow." Alex looked at Ethan. "I also tell them trust grows slowly." Ethan nodded. "I'll earn it." Months later, a quiet Sunday afternoon filled the Ashford garden. The treehouse echoed with laughter. 3 boys argued over pirate maps. Alex pretended not to know where the treasure was hidden. Amelia watched from the porch with a cup of tea. Across the lawn, Ethan helped Noah repair a toy airplane. No cameras. No wealthy guests. No audience. Just ordinary moments. Margaret sat beneath a maple tree reading stories about firefighters to the boys. Every now and then, she paused to smile at a photograph of Elias that now stood proudly beside family pictures no longer hidden by grief. Nothing could return the years they had lost. But love had found a way to begin again. Amelia slipped her hand into Alex's. "Thank you." He smiled. "For what?" "For teaching me that the greatest revenge." She shook her head with a smile. "No. The greatest victory is building a life so full of love that the people who once tried to break you no longer have the power to define you." Alex kissed her forehead. "I've always believed success is measured differently." "How?" He looked toward the boys laughing in the sunlight. "Not by what you own. By whose lives are better because you were there." Amelia watched the children race across the grass, their laughter carried by the warm afternoon breeze. For years, she had believed the invitation was meant to reopen the deepest wound of her life. Instead, it had revealed a hidden brother, reunited a broken family, and reminded everyone in that ballroom of a simple truth. Status can command attention. Money can buy comfort. But dignity, compassion, and unconditional love are the only legacies that truly endure. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and like to help us grow. The end.